Get out of my cabin!
I don't care what tickets they're waving around. This is my space, and I will not share it with people like that. The words sliced through the luxurious, first-class cabin like a knife through silk. Madison Hartwell stood in the doorway of the royal suite, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at two passengers who sat quietly in leather seats that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her voice carried the kind of entitlement that money can't buy, but privilege often breeds. She stole their seats at 8:45 p.m. By 9:15 p.m., the entire airline ceased operations. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you've ever paid for something only to have someone else take it because they thought they deserved it more. This story is for you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button because in 30 minutes, everything you think you know about power and privilege gets turned upside down. The two passengers Madison was screaming at weren't just any couple. Damon Rivers, 52, sat with the quiet dignity of a man who had built empires from nothing. His wife, Celeste, 49, clutched her boarding pass with trembling fingers, her anniversary dress suddenly feeling too fancy for the humiliation washing over her. They were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary with their first luxury vacation in 3 decades. What Madison didn't know was that she had just declared war on the wrong man. The scene was Apex Airways Flight 1847 scheduled to depart JFK International Airport bound for London Heathrow. The aircraft, a state-of-the-art Airbus A350, featured only 6 royal suites in its nose section. Each suite was a private cabin with closing doors, a double bed, and amenities that rivaled 5-star hotels. The tickets cost $14,000 each. Damon had paid in full 6 months in advance. Madison Hartwell, 28 years old and blessed with both stunning looks and a trust fund the size of Rhode Island, had never paid for a first-class ticket in her life. She was the daughter of Richard Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Media Empire, which owned 3 major news networks and dozens of lifestyle magazines. With 7.2 million Instagram followers hanging on her every perfectly curated post, Madison lived in a world where doors opened before she knocked and rules bent around her convenience. But tonight was different. Tonight she had arrived at the gate without a reservation, expecting her usual treatment, only to be told that every royal suite was booked. The very concept that she might be denied something was so foreign to her that she assumed it had to be a mistake. The mistake was hers. Isabella Martinez, a flight attendant with 6 years of impeccable service, stood frozen between them. Her dark eyes darted between Madison's furious face and Damon's calm expression. She had seen difficult passengers before, but this felt different. This felt dangerous. Isabella knew the rules. She knew Damon and Celeste had valid tickets. She also knew that Madison's father had the power to destroy careers with a single phone call. The Hartwell Media Empire had a reputation for crushing anyone who crossed the family, and Isabella was a single mother who couldn't afford to lose this job. Captain Roberto Rodriguez, a veteran pilot with 25 years of flawless service, received a call in the cockpit just as the confrontation began. On the other end was Richard Hartwell himself, his voice carrying the authority of a man who owned newsrooms and controlled narratives. "Captain, I understand my daughter is having some difficulty with seating arrangements. I trust you'll resolve this appropriately." It wasn't a request. Jake Thompson, 22 years old and working his way through college as a gate agent, watched the entire scene unfold through the jet bridge window. He had processed Damon and Celeste's tickets himself just an hour earlier, marveling at the royal suite booking. He had never seen anyone actually purchase those seats. They were always given as upgrades to celebrities or companions of airline executives. But Damon Rivers had paid cash. The other passengers in the cabin began to notice the disturbance. A tech executive in seat 3C discreetly started recording on his phone. A fashion blogger in seat 4A went live on TikTok. The viewer count started climbing 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 people watching in real time, as privilege collided with principle at 30,000 feet. Madison's assistant, a nervous young man named Trevor, held up a professional camera live streaming the entire confrontation to Madison's millions of followers. He had been trained to capture content, not to question whether that content might destroy lives. The stage was set for a collision that would change everything. Damon Rivers sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap, watching Madison's performance with the patience of a man who had seen entitlement before and knew how it ended. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet enough that everyone had to lean in to hear it. "Young lady," he said, his words measured and calm. "My wife and I have tickets for these seats. We've paid for these seats. And we're going to sit in these seats." Madison's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Do you have any idea who my father is? I could destroy this airline with one Instagram story." Damon's expression didn't change. "I'm sure you could try." What Madison couldn't see was the small smile playing at the corner of Damon's lips. What she couldn't know was that Damon Rivers wasn't just another passenger. He was the founder and CEO of Titan Logistics Group, the company that held 60% of Apex Airways' operational debt. In exactly 30 minutes, Madison Hartwell would learn the difference between influence and power, and the world would watch it happen one viral video at a time. Damon Rivers had started with nothing but determination and a beat-up delivery truck purchased with his last $500. 25 years ago, he was just another young black man in Detroit trying to make something of himself in a world that seemed designed to keep him down. Today, he owned Titan Logistics Group, a fleet management empire that serviced major airlines, shipping companies, and transportation networks across 3 continents. The path from one truck to a billion-dollar enterprise hadn't been easy. Damon remembered the early days when potential clients would take one look at him and assume he was the driver, not the owner. He remembered being told his company was too small to handle major contracts, even when he was the lowest bidder with the best track record. He remembered bank meetings where loan officers questioned whether he understood the numbers he was presenting. But Damon had something more powerful than their prejudice. He had persistence. Every rejection became fuel. Every closed door became motivation to build his own. He worked 18-hour days, slept in his office, and reinvested every penny back into the business. When companies wouldn't give him contracts based on his experience, he bought smaller companies that already had those contracts. When banks wouldn't loan him money, he found private investors who believed in profits over prejudice. Celeste had been there through it all. They met at Wayne State University, where she was studying education, and he was working toward his business degree while managing a part-time job at a logistics company. Their first date was at a diner where they shared a piece of pie because neither could afford dessert alone. Their wedding was in her parents' backyard, with 75 guests and a reception catered by her aunt's soul food restaurant. For the first 5 years of marriage, they lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and ate ramen noodles 4 nights a week so Damon could funnel every dollar into his growing business. Celeste worked as a substitute teacher during the day and took in sewing at night. They drove a used Honda with no air conditioning and 200,000 miles on the odometer. Baby Damon used to tell her during those lean years, "This isn't forever. I'm building something that's going to take care of us for the rest of our lives." Celeste never complained. Not when he missed dinners because of client meetings. Not when he had to cancel their anniversary plans because a major contract was being negotiated. Not when other couples their age were buying houses while they were still renting. She believed in him when he didn't even believe in himself. The breakthrough came in year 6. A regional airline needed emergency logistics support when their primary contractor defaulted on a massive contract. Damon's company was small, but they were available, reliable, and hungry. He bid aggressively, knowing this contract could either make his company or destroy it. They delivered flawlessly. Not only did they handle the original scope, but Damon identified inefficiencies in the airline's supply chain that saved them millions of dollars annually. Word spread. Contracts multiplied. Within 3 years, Titan Logistics was managing ground operations for 12 airlines across the Midwest. But Damon never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the feeling of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. He hired aggressively from communities that looked like the neighborhood where he grew up. He mentored young entrepreneurs who reminded him of himself, and he never, ever flaunted his wealth. Even now, worth over $800 million, Damon drove a 10-year-old Honda Accord. He shopped at Target. He still preferred diners to five-star restaurants. Wealth, he believed, was a tool for building more opportunities, not a costume for impressing strangers. Celeste taught middle school for 20 years before retiring to focus on their charitable foundation. She remained the same humble, gracious woman who used to mend his work clothes by hand. Success had changed their bank account, but not their character. This anniversary trip to Paris was Damon's idea. For 30 years, Celeste had supported his dreams, sacrificed her comfort for his ambitions, and celebrated his victories as if they were her own. She had never asked for luxury. She had never demanded recognition. But Damon wanted to give her the world, starting with a first-class flight to the city she had dreamed of visiting since childhood. Damon, she had protested when he showed her the tickets. Those cost more than our first car. "Baby," he replied, using the same phrase from their struggling years. "We ate ramen for 5 years so I could buy that first truck." You deserve Paris in style. Madison Hartwell, meanwhile, had never eaten ramen out of necessity. Born into the kind of generational wealth that insulates children from consequences, she had grown up in a world where no was a foreign concept, and impossible was merely a challenge for her father's lawyers to overcome. Richard Hartwell had built his media empire through strategic acquisitions and ruthless business practices. He owned news networks that shaped public opinion magazines that influenced culture and digital platforms that controlled information flow. His net worth exceeded $3 billion, but more importantly, he possessed something money couldn't buy: influence over public perception. Madison had leveraged her father's power into her own brand of celebrity. Her Instagram account showcased a lifestyle of private jets, designer clothes, and exclusive events. Her followers lived vicariously through her posts, watching her attend Fashion Week, ski in Switzerland, and vacation in the Maldives. But Madison's influence was borrowed, not earned. She had never built anything, created anything, or struggled for anything. Her wealth was inherited, her connections were gifted, and her opportunities were purchased. She possessed all the arrogance of achievement with none of the humility that actual accomplishment brings. The irony was that Madison's father, despite his flaws, had actually earned his position through intelligence and determination. Richard Hartwell had grown up middle class and built his empire through strategic thinking and calculated risks. But he had protected Madison from the struggles that had shaped him, creating a daughter who expected the world to bend to her desires without understanding the effort required to make it happen. Madison's social media presence was carefully curated by a team of professionals who managed her brand, crafted her content, and optimized her engagement. She had assistants for her assistant stylists, for her casual wear, and photographers for her candid moments. Her entire life was performed for an audience that confused her lifestyle with her identity. Tonight, stepping onto Apex Airways Flight 1847, Madison expected the same choreographed deference she received everywhere else. She expected the rules to bend, the policies to flex, and the obstacles to vanish. She had no reservation, no ticket, and no right to be there, but she had something she believed was more powerful: influence. She was about to learn the difference between influence and actual power. The collision between these two worlds was inevitable. Damon represented earned success, quiet dignity, and principled strength. Madison represented inherited privilege, performative entitlement, and consequences deferred. When they met in that first-class cabin, it wasn't just about airplane seats. It was about justice, respect, and whether character still mattered in a world obsessed with celebrity. The answer would change everything. The JFK International Airport Premium Lounge hummed with the quiet efficiency that money purchased. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers, while elegant travelers sipped champagne and checked their phones in leather armchairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The lighting was warm, but not bright. The conversations were hushed, but not secretive, and the atmosphere was cultivated to make wealthy passengers feel like they belonged in this rarefied air. Damon and Celeste Rivers sat near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac, watching massive aircraft taxi past like metallic whales in an ocean of concrete. Celeste held her boarding pass carefully, as if it might disintegrate if handled too roughly. The golden embossed letters spelled out their seats, Royal Suite 1A and 1B. "Are you sure we belong here?" Celeste whispered, glancing around at the other passengers. A tech mogul in designer jeans worked on his laptop while his assistant brought him sushi. A fashion executive conducted a phone call in rapid Italian while examining fabric swatches. A politician she recognized from television sat in the corner reading briefing papers and occasionally laughing at something on his phone. Damon squeezed her hand, his rough palm covering her manicured fingers. Even after 30 years and hundreds of millions of dollars, she still sometimes felt like the young teacher from Detroit who clipped coupons and shopped clearance racks. "Baby, we belong anywhere we can afford to be. And trust me," he smiled, "we can afford to be here." A lounge attendant approached their table, a young woman with perfect posture and a practiced smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Rivers, your private car is ready to escort you to the aircraft. Captain Rodriguez wanted me to personally ensure your comfort this evening." Celeste's eyes widened. "A private car standard service for Royal Suite passengers," the attendant explained. "We'll take you directly to the aircraft steps, bypassing the terminal crowds." As they gathered their belongings, Damon noticed other passengers watching them with curiosity. He was used to the stares, the subtle once-overs that people gave when trying to figure out how a black couple could afford first-class luxury. Some stares were envious, others were suspicious, and a few carried the barely concealed resentment of people who believed certain spaces should remain exclusive to certain types. But tonight, Damon didn't care about their stares. Tonight was about Celeste. The private car was a sleek black Mercedes that glided across the tarmac like a shadow. Through the tinted windows, they watched ground crews loading luggage, refueling aircraft, and performing the intricate ballet of airport operations. Damon made mental notes, his logistics mind automatically analyzing efficiency patterns and potential improvements. Old habits died hard. "Look at that," Celeste marveled, pointing to their aircraft. The Apex Airways Airbus A350 gleamed under the terminal lights, its silver and blue livery pristine and elegant. "It's beautiful." "Not as beautiful as you," Damon replied, earning an eye roll and a smile from his wife. They climbed the aircraft stairs like celebrities at a movie premiere, their private escort ensuring they never waited in line or jostled with other passengers. At the aircraft door, they were greeted by Isabella Martinez, the lead flight attendant whose warm smile seemed genuinely pleased rather than professionally obligated. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Rivers," Isabella said, checking their boarding passes. "Right this way to your suite. Everything has been prepared according to your preferences." The royal suite was breathtaking. Polished mahogany walls surrounded cream-colored Italian leather seats that converted into a full-size double bed. A 55-inch television screen dominated one wall, while the opposite side featured a panoramic window offering unobstructed views. A bottle of Dom Perignon 2008 sat in an ice bucket condensation beating on the crystal-clear glass. "Oh my goodness," Celeste breathed, running her hand over the buttery soft leather. "Damon, this is like a hotel room that flies." "I could get used to this." She laughed, settling into seat 1A. She took out her phone and snapped a selfie, then deleted it, then took another one. "Do I look okay? I've never taken a picture in first class before." Damon sat in 1B, stretching his legs in the abundant space. He pulled his small, battered notebook from his pocket, an old habit from his early business days. He still took notes on service quality wherever he went, though now it was more professional curiosity than necessity. "The champagne is a nice touch," he murmured, jotting down observations. "Cabin temperature is perfect, noise level minimal." For 20 minutes, it was pure magic. They clinked glasses, took pictures, and marveled at the luxury surrounding them. The plane began filling with other passengers, their voices muffled by the heavy soundproof doors that separated the royal suites from the rest of the aircraft. Celeste browsed the entertainment system while Damon reviewed the wine menu with genuine appreciation for the selections. The flight attendants moved efficiently through their pre-departure preparations, checking safety equipment and ensuring passenger comfort. Isabella stopped by twice to ask if they needed anything, her attentiveness professional but not intrusive. Sir Isabella said during her second visit, "Captain Rodriguez wanted me to inform you that we have a slight delay due to air traffic control, but we expect to depart within 30 minutes. "Not a problem," Damon replied. "We're in no hurry to leave this beautiful cabin." That's when they heard the commotion outside their door. Madison Hartwell had arrived at JFK International Airport in characteristic style 45 minutes late, dramatically overwhelmed and absolutely furious that the world had dared to continue functioning in her absence. Her white BMW X7 screeched to a stop at the departure curb, music blasting from speakers that cost more than most people's cars. She emerged from the driver's seat like a hurricane making landfall. White Chanel blazer, perfectly distressed designer jeans, and Louboutin heels that clicked against the pavement with military precision. Her blonde hair was styled in an aggressive bob that somehow managed to look both effortless and expensive, and her oversized sunglasses remained firmly in place despite the terminal's indoor lighting. Trevor, her assistant and designated content creator, scrambled out of the passenger seat with professional camera equipment strapped across his thin frame. At 24 years old, he had learned to anticipate Madison's needs, document her experiences, and stay invisible unless specifically summoned. He had been filming her life for 18 months, creating the carefully curated content that fed her social media empire. Trevor. "Are you getting this?" Madison called over her shoulder as she strutted through the terminal. "My followers need to see how real people travel." The irony was completely lost on her. Jake Thompson was having a long shift at the Apex Airways gate counter. The spring break travel season, combined with mechanical delays on 2 aircraft, had created a perfect storm of frustrated passengers, missed connections, and last-minute booking changes. At 22 years old and working his way through business school, Jake had developed thick skin for dealing with difficult travelers, but he had never dealt with Madison Hartwell. "I need the royal suite," she announced, approaching his counter without waiting in line. "Madison Hartwell. My assistant will handle the details." Jake looked up from his computer screen, taking in the expensive clothes, the practiced pose, and the camera pointed in his direction. "I'm sorry, Miss Hartwell, but I don't show any reservation under your name for tonight's London flight." Madison's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed dangerously. "That's impossible. I always fly Royal Suite. Check again." "Ma'am, I've checked thoroughly. All Royal Suites are occupied by passengers who booked months in advance. I can put you on the standby list for business class or standby." Madison's voice rose an octave. "Do you know who I am?" Trevor instinctively zoomed in with his camera, recognizing the build-up to content gold. Madison's followers loved her keeping it real moments, especially when service industry workers failed to recognize her importance. Jake consulted his training manual mentally. He had dealt with celebrities before, though none quite this demanding. "Miss Hartwell, I understand you're accustomed to premium accommodations, but without a confirmed reservation, I'm limited in what I can offer." "Limited." Madison laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Honey, I have 7.2 million followers watching my every move. One Instagram story from me could destroy this airline. Do you really want that responsibility?" The threat hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he recognized the position Madison was putting him in. He needed this job to pay for school. His managers needed their jobs to support their families, but he also knew the rules, and he knew that Damon and Celeste Rivers had paid full price for their seats months in advance. "Let me speak with my supervisor," Jake said carefully. "No," Madison snapped. "You fix this now, or I make a phone call that ends careers. Your choice." Behind her, other passengers in line began to murmur. Some were filming with their phones, recognizing the drama unfolding. Madison's name started circulating through the crowd, along with whispered comments about entitled influencers and patient gate agents. Jake's supervisor, Maria Santos, appeared as if summoned by the tension in the air. A 20-year veteran of airline customer service, Maria had seen every type of difficult passenger imaginable. She approached Madison with the calm professionalism that came from experience. "Miss Hartwell, I understand there's been some confusion about seating arrangements. Let me see what options we have available." Madison turned her attention to Maria like a laser focusing sunlight. Finally, someone with authority. "I need Royal Suite 1A and 1B. Make it happen." "Ma'am, those seats are currently occupied by passengers who purchased them 6 months ago. However, I can offer you our premium business class seats, which are quite comfortable. And are you not hearing me?" Madison's voice carried across the gate area, causing conversations to stop and heads to turn. "I am Madison Hartwell. My father owns half the media in New York. One phone call from me and this airline becomes a footnote in aviation history." Maria's expression didn't change, but Jake could see her jaw tighten slightly. "Miss Hartwell, I appreciate your position, but our seating is based on confirmed reservations and payment. If you'd like to make a reservation for a future flight." Madison pulled out her phone with the dramatic flair of a gunslinger drawing a weapon. "That's it. I'm calling Daddy." The call connected immediately, as Madison's calls always did. Richard Hartwell's voice was audible even to passengers standing nearby, his tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to solving problems through power rather than patience. "Madison. Darling. What's wrong?" "Daddy, these people at Apex Airways are treating me like some nobody. They're refusing to give me a first-class seat, and they're being completely unreasonable about it. Put the manager on the phone." Madison thrust her iPhone toward Maria with a triumphant smile. "He wants to talk to you." Maria took the phone reluctantly, knowing her next few words could determine her career trajectory. "This is Maria Santos, gate supervisor for Apex Airways." Richard Hartwell's voice was calm, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its quiet confidence. "Ms. Santos, my daughter requires accommodation on your London flight this evening. I trust you understand the situation and will resolve it appropriately. Sir, I appreciate your position, but we have a full flight with confirmed passengers." "Ms. Santos," Richard interrupted smoothly, "I own 3 news networks and 12 magazines. My media properties reach over 50 million people daily. Bad stories have a way of spreading quickly in today's connected world. I would hate for Apex Airways to become the subject of unfavorable coverage due to poor customer service." The threat was delivered with the sophistication of a man who had destroyed companies without raising his voice. Maria felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders like concrete. "I'll see what I can do, sir." "I knew you would." "And Ms. Santos, my daughter prefers Suite 1A and 1B. Thank you for your understanding." The line went dead, leaving Maria staring at a phone that had just delivered her career into Madison's manicured hands. Madison smiled sweetly as she retrieved her phone. "See, that's how things get done when you know the right people." Trevor continued filming, capturing the entire exchange for Madison's social media empire. The content would be edited later, showing only Madison's triumph while editing out the implied threats and family intimidation. Her followers would see a strong woman getting the respect she deserved, not a privileged daughter leveraging inherited power. Maria's hands shook slightly as she typed into her computer. She pulled up the passenger manifest for Flight 1847. her eyes scanning the royal suite bookings. 6 suites, all occupied, all paid in full months in advance. Her eyes stopped on Suite 1A and 1B, Rivers, Damon, and Celeste. She had processed their payment herself 6 months earlier, marveling at the fact that someone had actually purchased those seats outright, rather than receiving them as an upgrade. Mr. Rivers had been polite, professional, and patient during the booking process. Mrs. Rivers had seemed nervous but excited about their anniversary trip. Now, Maria had to choose between following company policy and protecting her job, between honoring confirmed reservations and avoiding corporate retaliation, between doing what was right and doing what was safe. Miss Hartwell. Maria said quietly, "We'll need to speak with the current passengers in those suites. There may be some flexibility in the arrangement." Madison's smile was pure victory. "I knew you'd see reason. Trevor, make sure you're getting this. My followers love it when I get proper service." As Maria walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft, she felt the weight of the decision she was about to make. In 5 minutes, she would knock on the door of Suite 1A and 1B and ask 2 paying passengers to give up their seats for someone who had neither paid nor reserved. She would ask them to move for no other reason than Madison Hartwell's father was powerful enough to destroy careers with a phone call. Behind her, Madison adjusted her sunglasses and prepared to board the aircraft like a conquering queen claiming her rightful throne. She had no idea that the quiet man sitting in Suite 1B wasn't just another passenger. She had no idea that Damon Rivers owned 60% of Apex Airways' operational debt. And she had absolutely no idea that in less than an hour her world would collapse completely. The soundproof door of Royal Suite 1A and 1B slid open with the whisper of hydraulics, and Madison Hartwell stepped into the space like a force of nature reclaiming stolen territory. She didn't knock. She didn't announce herself. She simply appeared in the doorway with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in her 28 years of existence. Trevor followed behind her with his camera already recording, capturing every second for the social media empire that funded Madison's lifestyle. The red recording light blinked steadily as Madison surveyed the suite with the calculating gaze of a general inspecting conquered territory. Damon and Celeste Rivers looked up from their champagne, startled by the sudden intrusion. Celeste instinctively reached for Damon's hand, her anniversary celebration interrupted by strangers invading their private space. Damon's expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened with the focus of a man who recognized confrontation approaching. "Excuse me," Madison announced, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "There's been a mistake with the seating arrangements. These are my seats." She gestured around the suite as if pointing out obvious facts to confused children. Her white Chanel blazer caught the soft cabin lighting, and her oversized sunglasses remained firmly in place, despite being indoors in dimly lit luxury. Celeste's grip tightened on her boarding pass, the expensive cardstock trembling slightly in her fingers. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. We have tickets for these seats." Madison's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Honey, I always sit in the royal suite. It's where I belong. You two must have gotten some kind of upgrade mistake or computer error." Damon set his champagne glass down slowly, the crystal making a soft clink against the mahogany table. His voice when he spoke carried the measured tone of a man who had learned to control his reactions through decades of business negotiations and social challenges. "Miss, I'm afraid we purchased these tickets 6 months ago. Full payment, confirmed reservation. Perhaps you should speak with the gate agent about alternative arrangements." Madison's smile froze for a moment as if her brain needed extra time to process the concept of someone actually saying no to her. When she finally spoke again, her voice had acquired a dangerous edge that Trevor recognized as prime content material. "Do you know who I am?" Madison asked, removing her sunglasses for dramatic effect. Her ice-blue eyes swept over Damon and Celeste with the kind of cold assessment usually reserved for inferior merchandise. "I'm Madison Hartwell. My father owns Hartwell Media Empire. I have 7. 2 million followers across my social platforms. She paused, waiting for recognition, acknowledgement, or preferably both. When neither Damon nor Celeste showed appropriate awe, her expression darkened further. People like you should be grateful to even see first class, let alone sit in it. Madison continued, her voice rising with each word. Trevor zoomed in with his camera, capturing what he knew would be viral content within hours. These seats are for people who understand luxury, who belong in luxury. The words hit Celeste like physical blows. She had spent her entire life being made to feel like she didn't belong in certain spaces, didn't deserve certain comforts, wasn't quite good enough for certain standards. The old insecurities came flooding back, 30 years of success and security suddenly feeling as fragile as tissue paper. Madison Celeste whispered, looking toward Damon with eyes that pleaded for them to avoid confrontation. Maybe we should just move to business class. We don't want any trouble. No. Damon's voice was quiet, but absolutely final. He turned to face Madison directly, and, for the first time since entering the suite, she felt a flicker of uncertainty. There was something in his eyes, a depth of quiet strength, that her usual tactics seemed unable to penetrate. Young Lady Damon, continued his voice, never rising above conversational volume, my wife and I paid $14,000 each for these seats. We have confirmed reservations. We have boarding passes. And we're going to sit exactly where we belong. Madison's mouth fell open slightly. In her 28 years of existence, she could count on one hand the number of times someone had refused to accommodate her demands. The sheer audacity of this ordinary-looking couple was both infuriating and incomprehensible. Do you have any idea what I could do to you? Madison's voice climbed toward hysteria. One Instagram story from me could destroy your little lives. I could make you unemployed, homeless, completely ruined with a single post. Is that a threat? Damon asked, his tone remaining maddeningly calm. It's a promise. Madison shrieked, her composure finally cracking completely. I could buy this entire airline with my trust fund? Trevor continued filming, recognizing that they had moved beyond content creation into something larger and potentially more dangerous. His camera captured every word, every expression, every moment of the confrontation that was about to change everything. Isabella Martinez appeared in the doorway behind Madison, drawn by the raised voices and obvious distress. She had hoped to resolve whatever misunderstanding was occurring before it escalated further, but one look at the scene told her she was already too late for quiet diplomacy. Is everything okay here? Isabella asked, though the tension in the room made the question rhetorical. Madison spun around with the fury of a storm changing direction. No, everything is not okay. These people are in my seats and they're refusing to move. I want them removed from this aircraft immediately. Isabella looked between Madison's furious face and the River's shocked expressions, understanding immediately that she was being placed in an impossible position. Company policy was clear, confirmed passengers with valid tickets had the right to their assigned seats. But she also knew that Madison's father had already called Captain Rodriguez personally. Ma'am, Isabella said carefully, Mr. and Mrs. Rivers have valid boarding passes for these seats. Perhaps we could find alternative accommodations for you in our business class section. Alternative accommodations. Madison's voice rose to a pitch that threatened to shatter the crystal champagne glasses. I am Madison Hartwell. I don't do alternative accommodations. She pulled out her phone again, this time calling someone else. The conversation was brief, conducted in the sharp tones of someone accustomed to getting immediate results. Within minutes, Captain Rodriguez himself appeared in the doorway, his uniform impeccable and his expression deeply uncomfortable. At 58 years old, with 25 years of commercial aviation experience, he had faced hijackers, mechanical failures, and weather emergencies with less stress than this single social media influencer was causing. Mr. Rivers. Mrs. Rivers, Captain Rodriguez said formally. I apologize for the inconvenience, but we've received some special instructions regarding seating arrangements. Would you be willing to relocate to our premium business class section? We'll provide full compensation and future flight credits. Damon studied the captain's face, reading the discomfort and embarrassment in the older man's expression. Captain, are you asking us to give up seats we paid for to accommodate someone who didn't make a reservation, sir? This is a unique situation. Miss Hartwell's family has significant influence, and we're trying to avoid any complications that might affect the airline's reputation. Affect the airline's reputation, Damon repeated slowly. I see. Madison's smile returned in full force. Finally, someone with sense. Trevor, make sure you're getting this. This is how real customer service works. But Damon wasn't moving. If anything, he seemed to settle deeper into his seat, his expression shifting from patient tolerance to something harder and more determined. Captain Rodriguez. Damon said quietly, I've been flying commercial airlines for 30 years. I've been bumped from flights delayed by weather and inconvenienced by mechanical issues. I've never complained, never demanded special treatment, never threatened anyone's livelihood. He gestured toward Madison, who was checking her phone and apparently live tweeting the encounter to her millions of followers. But I will not be intimidated out of seats I paid for by someone who believes her father's money makes her better than my wife. The temperature in the suite seemed to drop 10 degrees. Madison looked up from her phone, suddenly aware that something had shifted in the confrontation dynamics. Excuse me, Madison said, her voice carrying a dangerous note that Trevor recognized as the prelude to nuclear content. You heard me correctly, Damon replied. You walked into our private suite uninvited, insulted my wife, threatened our livelihood, and demanded we give up something we paid for because you believe you're entitled to whatever you want. Madison's face flushed red with anger and disbelief. How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know what my family could do to you? One phone call and your pathetic little lives become national news. I could destroy everything you've ever worked for. Celeste started to speak to try to defuse the situation, but Damon gently squeezed her hand and shook his head. This had moved beyond compromise. This was about principled dignity and whether character still mattered in a world obsessed with influence. Miss Hartwell, Damon said, his voice carrying 30 years of quiet strength threats, don't impress me. Money doesn't intimidate me. And your father's influence doesn't concern me. He stood up slowly, his 6-foot frame filling the space with calm authority. But I'll tell you what does concern me. It concerns me that you think you can treat people as disposable. It concerns me that you believe wealth gives you the right to humiliate strangers. And it concerns me that you're so accustomed to getting your way that you can't conceive of facing consequences for your actions. Madison stared at him, her mouth opening and closing without sound. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever stood up to her influence, her family's power, or her social media reach. The very concept of resistance was so foreign that she couldn't process what was happening. You want to destroy my life, Damon continued. Go ahead and try. But you're going to do it from business class because my wife and I are staying right here where we belong. Trevor's camera captured every second as Madison's carefully constructed world began to crack around the edges. For the first time in her life, someone had called her bluff. For the first time in her privileged existence, she had encountered power that her influence couldn't touch. You have no idea who you're messing with, Madison whispered, her voice trembling with rage and confusion. Damon smiled slightly, the expression carrying no warmth but a great deal of satisfaction. Actually, Miss Hartwell, I think you're the one who has no idea who you're messing with. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, a simple device that looked ordinary but was about to unleash consequences that would reverberate far beyond this aircraft cabin. Isabella, Damon said quietly, would you mind stepping outside for a moment? I need to make a phone call, and then we can resolve this situation permanently. Madison laughed, but it was a brittle sound without humor. Another phone call. What are you going to do? Call your lawyer. Call the police. Nobody cares about your little tantrum. Actually, Damon set his finger hovering over a contact in his phone. I'm going to call my office and initiate Protocol 7. Protocol 7. Madison scoffed. What is that, some kind of customer service complaint? Damon's smile widened slightly. Something like that. He pressed the call button, and Madison Hartwell's world was about to change forever. The phone rang once before a crisp professional voice answered. Titan Logistics Group, Maria speaking. How may I assist you? Mr. Rivers Damon's call wasn't routed through the normal customer service channels. It went directly to his executive assistant, a woman who had been handling his emergency communications for over a decade. Maria Rodriguez knew exactly what Protocol 7 meant, and her voice immediately shifted to the tone reserved for crisis management. Maria, I need you to initiate Protocol 7 for Apex Airways, effective immediately. Damon said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had built a billion-dollar empire. Madison looked confused, as if she had stumbled into a foreign language conversation. What is Protocol 7? She demanded. What are you talking about? Damon didn't answer her. He was focused entirely on the phone call that was about to change the trajectory of everyone's evening. Sir, are you certain? Maria's voice carried through the speaker clearly enough for others to hear. Protocol 7 is comprehensive. Once initiated, it cannot be easily reversed. I'm certain, Damon replied. Full implementation, all Apex Airways operations. Authorization code is November 77 Alpha. Understood, sir. Protocol 7 is now active. All relevant parties are being notified immediately. Should I inform legal that we may need documentation? Yes. And Maria. Make sure Captain Rodriguez receives the notification personally. Celeste was staring at her husband with a mixture of confusion and growing concern. In 30 years of marriage, she had never heard him use that tone of voice or mention anything called Protocol 7. Damon, what's happening? Madison was looking between them with the growing unease of someone who had walked into a situation they didn't understand. Trevor continued filming, though his camera was capturing expressions of confusion rather than the triumphant content he had expected. Trevor, what's he doing? Madison asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. What's Protocol 7? Trevor shrugged helplessly. He had been filming Madison's interactions for 18 months, documenting her ability to bend situations to her will through influence and family connections. But this felt different. This felt like they had walked into something much larger than a seating dispute. 2 minutes later, Captain Rodriguez's phone rang in the cockpit. He answered immediately, expecting to receive final pre-flight clearance from air traffic control. Instead, he found himself connected to a conference call that included Apex Airways CEO Robert Kane, Chief Operating Officer Linda Hayes, and someone from a logistics company he had never heard of. Captain Rodriguez CEO Kane's voice was tight with stress. We need you to return to the gate immediately. Do not begin taxi procedures. Do not start engines. Keep all passengers seated until further notice. Sir, is there a mechanical issue? Security concern, Captain Rodriguez asked, running through emergency protocols in his mind. Captain, this is Linda Hayes from Operations. We've just received notification that our primary logistics contractor has initiated what they call Protocol 7. All of our ground operations have been suspended pending immediate review. Captain Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. Ma'am, I don't understand. What does that mean for flight operations? The voice that answered wasn't from Apex Airways management. It was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Captain Rodriguez. This is David Chen from Titan Logistics Group. As of this moment, all Apex Airways flights are grounded indefinitely. Your aircraft will not be cleared for departure until further notice from our operations team. I'm sorry, who is? Titan Logistics Group, Captain Rodriguez asked. though a growing sense of dread was already providing him with answers he didn't want to hear. Captain CEO Kane's voice returned, audibly shaking now. Titan Logistics Group holds 60% of our operational debt. They manage our ground crews, our baggage handling, our fuel contracts, and our maintenance schedules. If they withdraw services, the implication hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Sir, are you telling me that one phone call from a passenger just shut down our entire airline, Captain? Please return to the gate immediately. We need to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. Back in Royal Suite 1A and 1B, Damon ended his call and looked calmly at Madison, who was staring at him with the first genuine uncertainty she had shown since boarding the aircraft. "What did you just do?" Madison demanded, though her voice had lost its aggressive edge and taken on a note of genuine concern. Before Damon could answer, Isabella Martinez appeared in the doorway, her professional composure visibly shaken. "Mr. Rivers, Captain Rodriguez needs to speak with you immediately." "Actually," Damon replied, standing and straightening his shirt, "I think I'll speak with him in the cockpit. This conversation requires some privacy." As Damon walked toward the front of the aircraft, Madison grabbed Trevor's arm with enough force to make him wince. "Follow him. Keep filming. I need to know what's happening." But when they reached the cockpit door, they found it blocked by two flight attendants who politely but firmly informed them that only Mr. Rivers was authorized to enter. Inside the cockpit, Captain Rodriguez was ending another conference call when Damon appeared. The veteran pilot turned around, and for the first time in his 25-year career, he found himself face to face with someone who wielded more power over his aircraft than he did. "Mr. Rivers," Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "I believe we need to discuss the situation." "Yes, we do," Damon agreed. "Captain, how long have you been flying commercially?" 25 years, sir." "Good career. Family, wife, and 2 daughters in college." Damon nodded thoughtfully. "Captain, in your 25 years of commercial aviation, have you ever been asked to remove paying passengers from confirmed seats to accommodate someone without a reservation?" Captain Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He knew exactly where this conversation was heading, and he knew his answer would determine not just his career, but potentially the fate of the entire airline. "No, sir. Not until tonight." "And what changed tonight?" "Sir, I received a direct call from Richard Hartwell. He made it clear that accommodating his daughter was important for ongoing business relationships." Damon was quiet for a long moment, studying the captain's face. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience with discrimination and its consequences. "Captain, my wife and I have been traveling for our anniversary. We saved money, made reservations, followed every rule, and paid full price for those seats. We were sitting quietly, bothering no one, celebrating 30 years of marriage." He paused, letting the words settle. "And we were asked to give up our seats because a young woman believes her father's influence makes her more important than other people's dignity." Captain Rodriguez closed his eyes. "Mr. Rivers, I need to know, what exactly is Protocol 7? "Protocol 7, Damon explained, is what happens when Titan Logistics Group determines that a client has violated the ethical standards outlined in our service agreement. When Protocol 7 is initiated, all services are suspended until the situation is resolved to our satisfaction. And Titan Logistics Group is my company, Captain. I founded it 25 years ago with one delivery truck and a determination to build something better than what existed. Today we provide ground services for 17 major airlines across 3 continents." The color drained from Captain Rodriguez's face. "Sir, are you saying—" "I'm saying that every bag on this aircraft was loaded by my employees. Every gallon of fuel was delivered through my contractors. Every maintenance check was performed using my logistics network. And every single one of those services has just been suspended." Captain Rodriguez slumped in his seat, understanding finally hitting him with the force of a physical blow. "Mr. Rivers, I had no idea. I was following orders from my CEO." "Who was following orders from Richard Hartwell?" Damon finished. "Captain, I don't blame you. You were put in an impossible position by people who should have known better." "What happens now?" Damon was quiet for a moment, considering his options. Through the cockpit windows, he could see ground crews standing idle near the aircraft, waiting for instructions that wouldn't come until this situation was resolved. "Now, Captain, we're going to walk back to that suite, and you're going to watch me explain to Miss Hartwell exactly what happens when influence meets actual power." As they left the cockpit, Captain Rodriguez felt like he was walking toward the most important conversation of his career. Behind them, phones were ringing throughout Apex Airways' corporate offices as executives tried to understand how a seating dispute had become a company-ending crisis. Madison Hartwell was about to learn that some people couldn't be intimidated, threatened, or dismissed. She was about to discover that the quiet man she had tried to humiliate possessed something her father's money couldn't buy: the power to turn off the lights. And she was going to learn it in front of millions of people because Trevor was still filming everything. Madison Hartwell stood in the center of Royal Suite 1A and 1B, like a general surveying a battlefield where the enemy had inexplicably vanished. She had expected Damon Rivers to return defeated, humbled, and ready to vacate her rightful seat. Instead, she heard the distinct sound of aircraft engines winding down, a sound that sent a chill through anyone familiar with air travel. "Trevor, why are the engines shutting off?" "Madison," asked her voice, carrying the first note of genuine uncertainty she had displayed all evening. Trevor lowered his camera for a moment, listening to the unusual quiet settling over the aircraft. "I don't know. Maybe mechanical issues." Through the suite windows, they could see ground crew members standing in small groups near the aircraft, pointing and talking among themselves with the confused body language of people who had received contradictory instructions. Baggage carts that had been moving purposefully toward the cargo hold now sat abandoned on the tarmac. Isabella Martinez appeared in the doorway, her professional composure strained to the breaking point. "Miss Hartwell, Captain Rodriguez would like to speak with all passengers in the Royal Suite section." Finally, Madison said, her confidence returning. "I assume he's coming to apologize and confirm that these people will be moved to appropriate seating." Isabella's expression suggested otherwise, but she didn't respond directly. Instead, she stepped aside as Captain Rodriguez and Damon Rivers approached the suite together. The captain's face was pale, and his usual authoritative bearing had been replaced by something approaching devastation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the weight of career-ending revelations. "I need to inform you that Flight 1847 has been delayed indefinitely due to operational complications." Madison's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together in annoyance. "Operational complications? What does that mean?" Damon settled back into his seat next to Celeste, who was watching the proceedings with growing alarm. She had never seen her husband orchestrate anything like this, and she was beginning to understand that the quiet man she had married possessed layers of influence she had never fully comprehended. "Miss Hartwell, Captain Rodriguez continued the operational complications relate directly to the seating dispute that occurred earlier this evening." "Excuse me." Madison's voice rose sharply. "Are you saying this delay is because these people won't move to coach where they belong?" Trevor raised his camera again, sensing that they were approaching something bigger than routine travel problems. His live stream viewer count had climbed to over 800,000 people watching in real time as the situation unfolded. Damon spoke for the first time since returning from the cockpit, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had finally decided to reveal his hand. "Miss Hartwell, let me explain exactly what has happened here tonight." Madison turned to face him with the same dismissive expression she had worn throughout their confrontation. But something in Damon's tone made her pause. There was no anger in his voice, no frustration or defensive posturing. Instead, there was the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards and was finally ready to play them. "When you demanded that my wife and I give up seats, we paid for," Damon continued. "You mentioned that your father owns media companies and has significant influence. You threatened to destroy this airline, ruin careers, and make our lives miserable if we didn't comply with your demands." "That's right," Madison replied, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "And I meant every word." "I'm sure you did." Damon nodded. "The problem, Miss Hartwell, is that you made those threats to someone who doesn't respond well to intimidation." He gestured toward the window where ground crews continued to stand idle, despite the aircraft's obvious need for departure preparations. "You see, I own a company called Titan Logistics Group. Perhaps you've never heard of it, but every major airline in North America has. We provide ground services, fuel delivery, baggage handling, and maintenance coordination for over 300 aircraft across 17 airlines." Madison's confident expression began to waver as she processed this information. "So what? You work for airlines. That doesn't give you the right to—" "Miss Hartwell," Damon interrupted gently, "I don't work for airlines. Airlines work for me. Titan Logistics Group holds the service contracts that keep commercial aviation functioning. When we suspend services, aircraft don't fly." The silence that followed was profound. Madison's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, her brain struggling to process the implications of what she was hearing. "Are you saying—" she began, then stopped, unable to complete the question. "I'm saying that when you threatened to destroy this airline, you were speaking to someone who actually has the power to do it," Damon replied. "And unlike you, I don't make empty threats." Trevor's camera captured the exact moment when Madison's world began to collapse. Her face went through a sequence of emotions: confusion, disbelief, understanding, and finally terror as the reality of her situation became clear. "You shut down the airline," Madison whispered. "I suspended Apex Airways operational contracts pending resolution of a customer service violation," Damon corrected. "Every flight, every aircraft, every passenger is currently grounded because of what happened in this suite tonight." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice heavy with the weight of professional catastrophe. "Miss Hartwell, Mr. Rivers is correct. As of 15 minutes ago, all Apex Airways operations have been suspended indefinitely. We cannot depart, we cannot refuel, we cannot even unload baggage without Titan Logistics Group authorization." Madison turned toward Trevor, her eyes wide with panic. "Turn off the camera. Stop filming. Delete everything." But Trevor was staring at his phone screen, watching as the viewer count climbed past 1 million people. The live stream had been shared across multiple platforms, and major news outlets were already picking up the story. Madison Trevor said quietly, "It's too late. This is everywhere. An Apex shutdown is trending on Twitter. There are news trucks heading to the airport." Madison's phone began buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media mentions, and news alerts flooded her screen in an endless cascade of digital chaos. Her carefully curated online presence was being overwhelmed by a story she couldn't control or contain. "Daddy will fix this," Madison said more to herself than to anyone else. "Daddy fixes everything." She dialed her father's number with shaking fingers, but the call went directly to voicemail. She tried again with the same result. On her third attempt, the phone was answered by someone who wasn't her father. "Miss Hartwell. This is James Morrison, Mr. Hartwell's assistant. He's currently in an emergency board meeting and cannot take calls." "Emergency board meeting?" Madison's voice cracked. "James, I need to speak with Daddy right now. There's been a misunderstanding, and Miss Hartwell—" "James interrupted, the board meeting concerns you. Hartwell Media stock has dropped 12% in the last hour due to viral video content involving you and an airline incident. Mr. Hartwell is currently managing a crisis situation. The phone went dead, leaving Madison staring at the device as if it had personally betrayed her. Around the aircraft, similar scenes were playing out in every cabin. Passengers were receiving notifications that their flights had been delayed indefinitely. Business travelers were missing crucial meetings. Families were stranded away from home. And all of it was being traced back to a single confrontation over airplane seats. Apex Airways CEO Robert Kane was experiencing the worst hour of his professional life. His phone had been ringing non-stop with calls from board members, investors, travel partners, and journalists asking for explanations he didn't have. The company's stock price was in free fall, social media was destroying their reputation in real time, and their entire operational capacity had been held hostage by a logistics company he had barely known existed. "Get me Damon Rivers on the phone immediately," Kane barked at his assistant for the third time in 20 minutes. "Sir, Mr. Rivers is not taking calls from corporate executives at this time. His assistant says all communication must go through their legal department." Kane felt his blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. Legal department. "He's holding our entire airline hostage over a seating dispute, sir, according to the Titan Logistics Group contract. They have the right to suspend services if they determine that a client has violated ethical standards. The contract specifically mentions discrimination and mistreatment of passengers as grounds for immediate action." Kane stared at the contract language his legal team had highlighted, understanding for the first time how thoroughly his airline had been outmaneuvered by someone who actually read the fine print. Back in the royal suite, Madison was scrolling through her social media feeds with growing horror. Her Instagram comments section had been overwhelmed by negative responses. Her Twitter mentions were flooded with criticism and mockery. Her TikTok account was being mass-reported for promoting discriminatory behavior. Worse, her own followers, the 7.2 million people who had previously worshipped her lifestyle, were turning against her with the swift brutality of mob justice. Comments that had once praised her confidence now condemned her entitlement. Videos that had once celebrated her influence now mocked her downfall. Trevor Madison said desperately, "Fix this. Edit the video. Make it look different. Make me look better." Trevor was staring at his own phone, watching as news outlets picked up the story. CNN, Fox News, NBC, and dozens of online publications were already running segments about the airline shutdown caused by influencer demands. Madison. "I can't fix this. It was live-streamed. Millions of people watched it happen in real time. There's nothing to edit." Madison's carefully constructed world was collapsing in real-time broadcast live to an audience that had once envied her lifestyle and now witnessed her ultimate humiliation. The same social media platforms that had elevated her to celebrity status were now documenting her spectacular fall from grace. And through it all, Damon Rivers sat quietly in his paid seat, watching the consequences of privilege meeting actual power play out exactly as he had predicted they would. The revolution was being televised, and Madison Hartwell was not the victor she had expected to be. The emergency board meeting at Apex Airways headquarters had the atmosphere of a funeral where the deceased might still be saved through immediate medical intervention. CEO Robert Kane stood at the head of a mahogany conference table surrounded by 12 board members whose combined net worth exceeded most small nations' GDP, yet they were powerless against one man's phone call. "How did we get here?" demanded board chairman Patricia Wells, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "How did one passenger complaint shut down our entire operation?" Kane's legal counsel. A sharp-featured woman named Elena Rodriguez slid a folder across the table. "The Titan Logistics Group contract contains clauses we apparently never fully examined. Section 14C grants them the right to suspend all services immediately if they determine that a client has violated ethical standards or engaged in discriminatory practices. Discriminatory practices. Board member James Foster leaned forward. We're talking about a seating dispute, not a civil rights violation. According to social media evidence, Rodriguez replied grimly. Ms. Hartwell demanded that 2 confirmed passengers give up paid seats based on statements that clearly indicate racial bias. The incident was live-streamed to over 1 million viewers and has been shared millions more times. Board member Susan Chen pulled up Twitter on her tablet, her face paling as she read the trending hashtags. Apex Racism, #Madison Meltdown, Justice. For Damon, Shut. It Down and #Privileged Princess are all trending globally. Our mentioned sentiment is 93% negative. 93% Kane felt his stomach drop. What about the other 7% bots and people making jokes? Chen replied. The financial implications were devastating. Apex Airways stock had opened at $67 per share. In the 4 hours since Madison's confrontation, it had plummeted to $31. The company had lost over $2 billion in market value, and the losses were accelerating as news outlets picked up the story. We need Damon Rivers to restart operations, Kane said, stating the obvious. What will it take? Rodriguez consulted her notes. His representatives have outlined several non-negotiable conditions for service restoration, such as complete overhaul of customer service policies with zero tolerance for discrimination, mandatory bias training for all staff, an independent review board for passenger complaints, and Isabella Martinez, the flight attendant involved, receives immediate promotion to head of passenger relations. Board member Robert Kim frowned. He's demanding personnel decisions that seems excessive for a service contractor. Mr. Kim Rodriguez replied, He's not just a service contractor. Titan Logistics Group holds 60% of our operational debt. If he chooses to call those loans, we would be forced into bankruptcy within 90 days. The room fell silent as the board members processed this information. They had spent the last 4 hours thinking about damage control and public relations. Now they realized they were actually fighting for the company's survival. Meanwhile, Madison Hartwell was experiencing her own version of financial apocalypse. Her phone had been ringing continuously with calls from sponsors, brand partners, and management companies not to offer support, but to terminate contracts. Madison, this is Sarah from Lux Cosmetics. We're immediately ending our partnership and pulling your campaign ads. The association is too toxic for our brand image. Madison Marcus from Elite Fashion here. We can't have our brand associated with discriminatory behavior. Your contract is terminated effective immediately. Miss Hartwell, this is David from Digital Influence Management. We're no longer able to represent you. Good luck with your future endeavors. Each call felt like another piece of her identity being stripped away. Madison had spent 8 years building her brand, carefully crafting an image of aspirational lifestyle and confident femininity. In 4 hours, that carefully constructed persona had been reduced to a cautionary tale about privilege and consequences. Richard Hartwell, Madison's father and CEO of Hartwell Media Empire, was facing his own crisis. The company's stock price had dropped 8% as investors worried about the family's judgment and public relations capability. More importantly, 3 major advertisers had already pulled campaigns from Hartwell Properties, citing concerns about the company's values. His assistant knocked on his office door. Sir, you have a call from Robert Kane at Apex Airways. He says it's urgent. Put him through, Richard replied, though he dreaded the conversation. Richard, we need to talk, Kane said without preamble. Your daughter just cost both our companies hundreds of millions of dollars. Bob, I understand you're upset, but... Upset. Kane's voice rose. Richard, my entire airline is grounded because your daughter couldn't accept that she doesn't own the world. Do you comprehend what that means? Richard Hartwell was a powerful man who had built an empire through strategic thinking and calculated aggression. But as he listened to Kane describe the scale of the crisis Madison had created, He felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, complete powerlessness. "What do you need from me?" Richard asked quietly. "I need you to control your daughter. I need you to fix whatever damage can be fixed. And I need you to understand that if Apex Airways goes bankrupt because of this incident, I will hold your family personally responsible." The call ended, leaving Richard staring out his office window at the New York skyline he had spent 40 years conquering. For the first time in his career, he wondered if his success had created a monster he couldn't control. Back on Flight 1847, Damon Rivers was accepting a phone call from his own lawyers who had been monitoring the situation from their offices in Detroit. "Damon, we've received contact from 17 different parties in the last 2 hours," his lead counsel reported. "Apex Airways wants to negotiate, Hartwell Media wants to settle, 3 airlines want to offer you service contracts, and the NAACP wants to offer you an award." "What about Madison Hartwell?" Damon asked. Radio silence from her legal team. "But her social media presence has been devastated. She's lost over 2 million followers in 4 hours, and major brands are dropping her faster than she can count." Damon looked over at Celeste, who was reading news coverage of their situation on her tablet. She looked up and caught his eye. "Are you satisfied?" she asked quietly. Damon considered the question carefully. "I'm satisfied that she understands consequences now. I'm satisfied that other passengers won't have to go through what we experienced tonight. I'm satisfied that influence isn't more important than character." "What happens next?" "Next, we make sure this changes things permanently." 2 hours later, Apex Airways CEO Robert Kane arrived at JFK Airport with a legal team, a PR consultant, and a humility he hadn't felt since his early career. He found Damon and Celeste Rivers sitting calmly in the airline's private lounge, looking less like hostage negotiators than passengers waiting for a delayed flight. Mr. Rivers Kane began, "I owe you an apology." "You owe my wife an apology," Damon corrected. "I can handle being insulted. But watching someone try to humiliate the woman I love, that's where I draw the line." Kane turned to Celeste with genuine remorse. "Mrs. Rivers, what happened tonight was inexcusable. You deserved better treatment, and I take full responsibility for the failure of our staff to protect your dignity." Celeste studied his face, measuring the sincerity of his words. "Mr. Kane, I've been made to feel like I didn't belong in certain places my entire life. What hurt me tonight wasn't just the discrimination, it was that people I trusted to do their jobs chose to enable it rather than stop it. That will never happen again," Kane promised. "We're implementing immediate changes to ensure every passenger receives equal treatment regardless of their appearance, background, or who they know." Damon handed Kane a folder containing detailed recommendations for policy changes. "These modifications are non-negotiable. Company-wide implementation, mandatory training, independent oversight, and quarterly reviews. Isabella Martinez will head the new passenger advocacy department." Kane reviewed the documents quickly, understanding that he was being handed a roadmap for rebuilding his company's reputation. "These changes are extensive. They'll require significant investment." "Mr. Kane," Damon replied. "How much has this incident cost you in the last 6 hours?" Kane's accounting team had provided regular updates. Stock losses, operational shutdown costs, legal expenses, and reputation damage had already exceeded $400 million. "Point taken," Kane said quietly. "When can operations resume?" "As soon as Isabella Martinez accepts her new position, and your first diversity training session is scheduled." 1 hour later, Apex Airways Flight 1847 finally began its pre-departure procedures. But the passengers boarding the aircraft were entering a fundamentally different airline than the one that had originally been scheduled to depart 8 hours earlier. Madison Hartwell was not among them. She had been quietly escorted from the airport by security after her increasingly desperate attempts to salvage the situation had attracted unwanted attention from news crews and angry fellow passengers. The last image of Madison that went viral that night was a paparazzi photo of her sitting alone in the back of a taxi staring at her phone as her world collapsed in real time. The caption that accompanied the image read, "Influencer discovers the difference between influence and power." As Flight 1847 finally lifted off for London, Damon and Celeste Rivers held hands and watched New York disappear beneath them. They were finally headed to Paris for their anniversary celebration, but they both understood that the real journey had been about standing up for dignity in a world that often confused privilege with power. The revolution hadn't been televised, it had been live-streamed. And for once, justice had been served at 30,000 feet. 6 months later, Damon and Celeste Rivers finally walked through the doors of their Parisian hotel, the same trip they had planned to take on that fateful night at JFK Airport. But this time the journey felt entirely different, not just because of the seamless service they received, but because of the changes that had rippled out from their stand against discrimination. The Apex Airways flight to Charles de Gaulle had been flawless. Captain Rodriguez, who had kept his job after demonstrating genuine remorse and commitment to change personally, greeted them at boarding. Isabella Martinez, now Director of Passenger Experience, had ensured their comfort without the obsequious deference that privilege demanded, but with the professional respect that every passenger deserved. Mrs. Rivers Isabella had said during the flight, "I wanted to thank you again for giving me the courage to do what was right that night." "You didn't need courage," sweetheart Celeste had replied. "You needed permission to trust your instincts. Never let anyone make you choose between your job and your conscience again." Now, standing in their elegant Parisian hotel suite overlooking the Seine Celeste, couldn't help but reflect on how different this moment felt from the anxiety and humiliation they had experienced 6 months ago. "Was it worth it?" she asked Damon as they unpacked. "All the drama. The media attention, the lawsuits." Damon paused in hanging up his jacket, considering the question that had been weighing on both their minds throughout the legal aftermath and social change that had followed their confrontation with Madison Hartwell. "Ask me that again after we see the Louvre tomorrow," he smiled. "But honestly, if it means the next couple like us gets treated with dignity from the moment they walk through the airport doors." "Absolutely." The changes hadn't been limited to Apex Airways. The viral video of Madison's meltdown had sparked a broader conversation about entitlement discrimination and accountability in the service industry. 3 other major airlines had voluntarily implemented similar passenger rights policies. 2 hospitality chains had revised their customer service training, and a dozen companies had ended relationships with social media influencers who promoted exclusivity over inclusivity. The case had also attracted attention from civil rights organizations, leading to new legislation protecting passengers from discrimination based on appearance or perceived social status. The Dignity in Transit Act had passed through Congress with bipartisan support, creating federal standards for equal treatment in commercial transportation. But perhaps the most satisfying change had been personal. Madison Hartwell's world had undergone a transformation as complete as any Greek tragedy. Her social media empire had collapsed overnight, with follower counts dropping from 7.2 million to fewer than 100,000. Major brands had terminated their relationships so quickly that her management team couldn't keep track of the canceled contracts. Her trust fund, while still substantial, had been placed in a restrictive account by her father as part of his own damage control efforts. The transformation hadn't been entirely punitive, though. After 6 months of genuine soul-searching, aided by court-mandated community service and diversity education, Madison had begun working at a local retail store in Manhattan. The change from private jets to subway commutes had been jarring, but it had also been educational. 3 days into their Paris vacation, as Damon and Celeste strolled through a designer boutique on the Champs-Élysées, Celeste stopped abruptly. "Damon," she whispered, "look." Behind the jewelry counter stood a young woman with familiar blonde hair carefully arranging bracelets in a display case. Madison Hartwell, former social media queen, was working as a sales associate in luxury retail, helping customers who had no idea about her previous life of inherited privilege. Madison looked up as they approached, and for a moment, the three of them existed in a bubble of shared history and complicated emotions. Madison's face cycled through embarrassment recognition and something that might have been genuine remorse. "Mrs. Rivers?" Madison said quietly, her voice lacking any of the imperious confidence that had once defined her. I didn't expect to see you here." Celeste studied the young woman carefully, noting the changes that 6 months of actual work had created. Gone were the designer clothes and professional makeup. In their place were a simple black dress, minimal cosmetics, and the slightly tired look of someone who had learned what 8-hour shifts felt like. Madison Celeste replied gently, "How are you doing?" Madison paused, seeming to struggle with a question she might not have been asked sincerely in years. "I'm learning. About work, about people, about who I actually am when I can't buy my way out of consequences." Damon remained quiet, letting his wife navigate the conversation. He had learned long ago that Celeste's instincts about people were usually more accurate than his own analytical approach. "Are you here alone?" Celeste asked. Madison nodded. "My father. We're not talking much right now. He thinks I need to figure out how to be a person before I can be his daughter again." She managed a small, self-deprecating smile. Turns out he was right about that. "And what have you figured out?" Madison was quiet for a long moment, organizing her thoughts with the care of someone who had learned that words carried consequences. "I figured out that I spent 28 years thinking the world existed for my entertainment," she said finally. "I thought people were props in my story and that money could edit out any mistakes I made." She gestured around the boutique. "Working here helping people who save for months to buy one piece of jewelry, it's taught me that everyone has a story that matters." Celeste reached across the counter and briefly touched Madison's hand. "That's a hard lesson to learn. Most people never do. Mrs. Rivers." Madison said, her eyes filling with tears she fought to control. "I know this doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I understand what I did to you that night. I tried to take away your dignity, your anniversary, your right to exist in a space you had paid for. I did it because I could not, because I should." She paused, wiping her eyes discreetly. "I can't undo that humiliation. But I can promise that I've learned what it feels like to have nothing to be, nobody to depend on the kindness of strangers, and I'll never forget how it felt to watch you maintain your grace while I lost mine completely." Celeste was quiet for a moment, then smiled with the warmth that had captured Damon's heart 40 years earlier. "Madison, we all make mistakes. The question isn't whether we fail, it's what we do after we fall." "What did you do?" Madison asked. "We got up. We stood our ground. And then we moved forward." Celeste picked up a simple silver bracelet from the display. "We'll take this one, please." As Madison processed the sale, her movements were careful and professional. She wrapped the bracelet in elegant tissue paper, added it to a signature bag, and handled the transaction with the attention to detail that her job required. "Thank you for shopping with us today," Madison said as she handed Celeste the bag. "And thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." As they left the boutique, Damon put his arm around his wife's shoulders. "That was very gracious of you." "She's learning," Celeste replied. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow. Even after what she put you through." Celeste was quiet for a moment as they walked along the famous avenue surrounded by couples and families enjoying Paris in the afternoon sunlight. "Damon, that night on the airplane, you didn't shut down Apex Airways for revenge. You shut it down so it could restart better. Maybe people can do the same thing." That evening, as they sat in a quiet restaurant overlooking Notre Dame Cathedral, Damon raised his glass of champagne in a toast to 30 years of marriage, to second chances, and to standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. And to learning that true power doesn't scream, Celeste added, clinking her glass against his. It simply acts. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand along the Seine River, both understood that their story had never really been about airplane seats or social media influence. It had been about dignity, respect, and the quiet strength required to defend both. The lights of Paris reflected off the water like scattered diamonds. And for the first time in 6 months, they felt like they were exactly where they belonged. Not because they could afford to be there, but because they had earned the right to be there through character, perseverance, and an unwillingness to accept that influence was more important than integrity. Somewhere across the Atlantic, Madison Hartwell was closing the boutique for the evening, learning what it meant to earn respect rather than demand it. And on a different continent entirely, Apex Airways was operating with new policies that protected every passenger's dignity regardless of their background or bank account. Change, they had learned, was possible. Justice was achievable. And sometimes the most important revolutions happened quietly, one conversation at a time, until the entire world was different. The story that had begun with anger and humiliation had ended with growth, understanding, and hope. And that perhaps was the most powerful transformation of all. This story reminds us that true power doesn't come from wealth or influence. It comes from character, dignity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Damon didn't just defend his seat, he defended the principle that every person deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or background. If you believe that character matters more than connections, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. If you think dignity should never be negotiable, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss stories like this. And drop a comment below telling us about a time you stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. Because the next time someone tries to tell you that you don't belong somewhere you've earned the right to be, remember that quiet strength can move mountains, and sometimes the most important stand you'll ever take is the one nobody expects you to make. Thanks for watching, and remember, justice doesn't always come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with a phone call.